Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Facility Management Day, session number 5. I hope that you are enjoying our sessions, and I believe this is a good opportunity for all facility management professionals around the globe to have this kind of interactive sessions. I believe that we have a remarkable presentation now. It's about challenging your team during a challenging time, facility management for mosques, and preparation for holy month of Ramadan. It's can we move next, please? If somebody have questions, we will make it at the end of the presentation. I believe that we don't have a pulse in this one, right, Ryan? Right?
No, there's no polls on here, no questions.
Yeah. So just
the broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
That this webinar will be recorded. You can back to this anytime you like, and you can make the use of this. Your participation, of course, is very much appreciated. Next, please. Yeah, this is our vision and mission. Next. And this is how can we help you in many ways. Next, please. We'd like to thank our sponsors that they have support in this event and other events as well. Next, please. Yeah, next. And I'd like you to remind you that if you are not registering for the upcoming seminars, you can still have a chance to do this. We will remind you at the end of this session with the upcoming one. Next, please. Yeah, we have contribution from a lot of countries, and we have presenters that are presenting different cases and different experiments from around the globe, and this is a good opportunity to have this kind of information exchange. Yes, next, please. This is our speakers and moderators for today. Yes, next. I'm Mohammed Lagroudi, your moderator for this session. I'm a chairman for Mosques for Services and Maintenance. And our presentation is challenging your team during a challenging time, facility management for mosques and preparing for the holy month of Ramadan by Ryan Darnell, Executive Director for Khidmah. I will hand over now to Ryan to start introducing himself. Yeah, to you, Ryan.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you very much for chairing this morning, and thank you everyone for joining. I understand it's either extremely late now in the US or it's very early where we are in the Middle East at the moment. So I don't like to talk about myself much, but what I will say is that I've been in the United Arab Emirates for the last almost 9 years now. I'm Australian, in case you didn't pick up the accent, and previously I worked for Jones Lang LaSalle out of Australia on a number of different corporate clients and contracts. The company I work for, Khidmah, is a UAE-based property solutions company that does property management, sales, leasing, owners association management, health club, and obviously facilities management. We're a locally grown company, and we've just expanded into Saudi Arabia, and actually that's where I'm coming to you from today. I'm in Al-Khobar in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. So today, the learning objectives I put together was basically understanding how FMs can manage unique assets under challenging circumstances. So a lot of us have looked after unique assets, and I've spoken to a lot of FMs obviously that have worked through challenging circumstances, but when those two are compounded together along with other external influences, I'm really interested in how FMs deal with that and how they learn from that and grow. The second objective is how we prepare to maintain mosques, not only with a short mobilization time, but also during the summer months and Ramadan occurring at the same time. And I'll talk a little bit about what happens during Ramadan and Eid, and also how that impacts obviously the FM operations, and particularly in the Middle East. And then understanding from us, what were our lessons learned and what changed and developed over the last 5 years as our contract has been renewed and grown, and we've learned more. So a challenge. So obviously a challenge is something that needs great mental or physical effort in order to be done successfully, and really tests our ability to perform, puts us through our paces. I want people to know a challenge is not a negative thing. Actually, a challenge is one of the reasons I moved to the UAE. Coming from Australia, I spoke to my counterparts in the US and the UK, and they told me, don't come because everything's been done. Everything's been put in place. You can develop things, but obviously in a developing market like the Middle East, like Southeast Asia, you will be able to be part of that growth and address and be part of those challenges, which is great. So for us, looking after 200 mosques in the western region of Abu Dhabi was a unique challenge, especially with at what time that came along in our organisation. So here's just some of the unique challenges we faced. The first was that it was one of the first major contracts that we were awarded as a newly formed, locally grown FM service provider. So at the time, and still we are owned by a developer. We were set up to not only look after that developer's assets, but also grow outside of that portfolio. So the mosque contract was one of the first contracts we actually picked up. So at the time we were doing in-house FM service provision, and we had less than 200 staff totally. So this was a huge challenge for us at the time. The second challenge was that this was the first contract that was actually outsourced by a newly formed government department called Musanada, which was previously the Department of Public Works. It was the first time they wanted to centrally bring together operations services and FM services under one umbrella. So that was a learning experience we went on with them also. The FM agreement was for 238 mosques in the remote western region of Abu Dhabi. Those that don't know the UAE, there's 7 emirates. So a lot of people obviously know about Dubai, Abu Dhabi. They're cities as well as emirates or states, as you would see them. And Abu Dhabi is the largest one in the west, and the western region is by far the largest land part of the UAE. So the mosques everywhere from Delma Island through to the border of Saudi Arabia. The GPS coordinates that we had and asset data we had that had been provided by the client at the time of the tender were inaccurate. They'd engaged a third party to do that data, and we came across a lot of discrepancies, which I'll talk about. And 80% of the contract was to be self-delivered as an in-house service provider. So that then throws up a lot of other challenges, because you have even things like your vehicles, your uniforms, your accommodation, all to be considered, planned and implemented as part of the contract. The mobilization period of 5 days, we look back at it now, I think that was an impossible task that we undertook, but at the time, we had to do it. There's no extension that could be provided, and the go-live date for the contract occurred 1 week prior to Ramadan. So again, not only do we have the challenge of mobilizing those 10 days, but we had to be ready so that in 7 days' time we would face a number of other challenges with the holy month of Ramadan occurring. So the first step we took was basically undertaking the challenge in a lot more detail. So for me, obviously, I'm not a Muslim myself, so I really had to understand a lot about the mosques, which was a great challenge for me. So we looked at the configuration and design of the mosques. A lot of people think that they're quite similar, but they are very different and unique. Understanding the different parts and components, the minarets, the domes, ablution areas. Understanding the operation, so understanding the core business of the mosque or the core operations of the mosque and what goes on in there, from prayers to events outside, to having whether sometimes the imam lives on site or not. The relationship with imam, and this was we had focused on this during the mobilization, but if I had my time over again, we would focus even more on this. So the relationship with Imam, considering this is a first generation outsourcing for the client, was really important to be done on a one-on-one basis. The Imams previously were used to doing their own maintenance externally, getting their own local service provider and having control. So the whole communication piece had to be done with the Imams on how we were taking that pain away from them, how we would look after them, things that we would do to better the mosque, and also allow them to focus on what they needed to do there themselves. So that was an area we really need to focus on, and it's not like a corporate contract where people have got email and different ways to approach them. It had to be done one-on-one. The salat timing, so that's the prayer timing, so understanding that there's 5 prayers per day, more during Ramadan, and understanding that obviously we can't go in and do operations during those times and working around them and letting that lead our service delivery. Jama'ah mosque versus non-Jama'ah. So Jama'ah mosques are busier on a Friday and also are more a prominent mosque. So this is something that we learnt as we were mobilizing, and we adapted our service delivery a little bit more, which I'll talk about later on. The critical assets, so obviously there's the traditional critical assets in nature that we have in FM, but in a mosque you need to understand what's critical for that operation. So understanding that when a pump fails for a mosque and people aren't allowed to perform wudu in the ablution areas, that's a huge impact to the worshippers going to the mosque. So again, adapting your service delivery to make sure that you are prepared for that and have that redundancy is important. So what we found is this then drives the information capture required during the condition assessment and takes us from a traditional condition assessment capture to a smarter assessment or condition assessment. So I'd been used to doing portfolios before. I looked after a large insurance provider in Australia that had 200 locations around Australia and were as remote as in Alice Springs, which is right in the middle of Australia. And so I understood the importance of having not only the detailed asset data, but also the abstracts. So at any time you could pick up that abstract and see the key elements of that property. So for us, we actually did this via a tablet. We had drop-down cells and questions that our technicians could do as they did the inspections, because one of the issues we found is that in the previous data captured, when it was done in a free-form way, that there were lots of spelling mistakes or errors. So if you're capturing a split air conditioning unit, that might be spelled 20 different ways. So this again was something we felt we had to do to make sure the data that came in was good data and was going to set the foundation for the operations. So you'll see some of the aspects here. So we've picked up obviously the location of the mosque, the photo, and just even without looking at the details here, I can see this is a non-Jama'ah mosque. I'm not going to have issues with scaffolding to get access to the roof. It's in a fairly remote area, and an imam is not on site. So that means that it's not going to have necessarily someone there every day to look at reactive service requests. So this information was vital. And then on the next page down is actually some asset summaries, so summaries of the different MEP assets that are on site. So I want to talk a little bit about traditional data capture versus smart data capture. So for me, that handover and mobilization is one of the most important aspects of taking over the contract. So in a traditional data capture, you're getting the location, obviously, of the property. You're looking at the coding and hierarchy of that location. So in a traditional tower, that might be that you have by floor, by area, by office type, by numbering system. Obviously, in a mosque, we had to do the same thing. So we had to identify the main prayer halls, female prayer rooms, ablution areas, etc. The asset hierarchy, so then attaching the assets to that in the different classifications, the detail type, the condition that they're in, any warranties that were there and installation dates, and then the barcoding of those assets, which we did obviously straight afterwards, and then having those on-site contacts. So that's a traditional data capture that then obviously goes in your CAFM or CMMS that you can then use. We approached it a step beyond this because what we wanted to do was not only take over the assets in a way that we could maintain them straight away, but also to start to look at some value adds that we could do for the contract. So we turned to a smart data capture. Again, this was all done on tablets. We captured the information that I showed before, so the different Jama'ah, non-Jama'ah, Imam housing, female prayer hall. And why, again, that's important is because gaining access to the female prayer hall during any time is difficult, especially if the Imam is not there. So we tend to go with the Imam to make sure that no one's inside at the time. Capturing the civil details, so the hardscaping, access to dome and minarets for painting is extremely important. As you'll see in that photo there, that's a Jummah mosque that we have, so getting access to that is difficult, and we actually had to change the configuration of our vehicles to match some of those mosques to get access. Disability access requirements, so we captured them at the same time as well. And what we started to do with energy and water is we started to capture what were the opportunities to save water, save power, and even the no-brainers, which were things like testing the lux level. So we had a lux reader that we went into the prayer halls, and it was amazing to see the changes, from 75 to 800 lux in those main prayer halls, and the energy saving that can be made straight away. And then we also looked at some of the operational savings there. So again, amazing that we went to some of these mosques and doors were left open or had no closes on there, or the lighting was basically one switch for the whole mosque rather than isolating the different areas that had to be turned on or off. So we did a lot of work around that as well. Health and safety, so we looked at the working at height requirements, which was again a huge challenge, and we had to redesign some of our vehicles to carry that height access equipment. We tested for evidence of asbestos on site, obviously, and sent those samples away. So it's, again, something we wanted our technicians to understand about and to capture. Third-party testing certificates and installations of the boards also, so that those visiting or the imams could actually see the last test date when it had to be done again, which is very important, and not just hide that on a CAFM system. And then obviously a complete fire and evacuation review of all the mosques. On the MEP side, we went a little step further. So what we actually looked at is we did calculations at the time of the areas and also the cooling capacity and the electrical load, because what we found is a lot of the mosques we'd had complaints on in Jummah mosques on Friday, or Ramadan mosque will be busy during Ramadan, were only designed for a certain volume or foot traffic of worshippers to go there. So we had to actually increase a lot of the air conditioning for some of the main prayer halls. But of course, you can't do that unless you've got the capacity of the electrical load. So we were checking that at the same time, and also identifying those critical assets and checking for redundancy. So if the pump didn't have redundancy, and we actually did this, we actually started carrying spare ground force pumps in our vehicles as well. What we also did is we did the predictive maintenance. We found that this was something that really added value. So thermographic surveys on distribution boards, power factor correction. Some of these assets were more than 20 years old, and this was for us really made life a lot easier when we went to the dropping the reactive calls. So obviously a lot of the preparation we did before the implementation, or that we did when we were tendering for the services. So things like the service model, we created by a service team. We were lucky at the time that we didn't have a business development function within the company, within Khidmah. So our operations team drove that tendering process. So what we said was what we did. Obviously, as we've grown, we need that now, that business development function with us, but they've always worked closely with operations. So we created what's known as a hub and spoke system, so much the same as you see in the aircraft industry. So we identified townships where we would put our accommodation, our central stores, and then we would put the spokes of that system out to nearby townships, and we would use our vehicles to carry those spares and equipment that could be carried to those sites also. So the idea was that any technician or vehicle could be within 30 minutes of any site. We really had to look at the importance of the equipment team and vehicles, so we designed our vehicles and we continue to design and adapt them over time because they became one of the most important things for our technicians to make sure they had access to all equipment and spares at the time. We really had to understand the remoteness. Some of the GPS data was incorrect for the locations of the mosques, so it showed some locations were in the middle of the ocean, some were in Pakistan, so we couldn't rely on that. When we did start to discover the locations, we started to understand that some of the vehicles had to be four-wheel drive, Some of our teams had to make sure that they had additional equipment for recovery as well, because one or two of the vehicles actually got stuck early on trying to get to some of these more remote mosques. And we had to be prepared to develop further. So when we set the service delivery model in place, we had to understand this is not set in stone. This is something that will continue to adapt. And very early on, we discovered that the two of the townships that were fairly close, we'd put more in one and not the other, due to the number of mosques and assets contained. However, what we found as we were doing the mobilization was that first township was actually more important, because a lot of the mosques were Jama'ah, even though they had not as many assets, significantly important for the client. So we actually adapted and changed our team slightly, and that needs to be done all the time. Obviously, the speed of mobilization with 10 days and then 7 days till Ramadan was vitally important. So we really looked at harnessing new technology at the time, and keep in mind this is now more than 5 years old. So at the time, the rollout of GPS tracking, I think we were one of the first providers in the area to do that. So we could identify any vehicle at any time. We had the screens in our control room with our call center, and we even had the ability to shut down any vehicles if we needed to, or get help to them if we needed to our technicians. And again, as I said, we fine-tuned our service delivery and we tweaked it. In the second photo here on the right, you'll see that this location here on the right-hand side is Medina Zayed and Marfa. Previously, we'd put less of a team there than we did in Liwa, which is below. Liwa is very spread out. From the western mosques to the eastern mosques, you talk about 200 to 250 kilometers. So given the number of assets, we put the more of the team there. We're actually, due to the Jama'ah mosques, we end up putting them in Medina Zayed, which is important. One of the biggest aspects that we did with the client, obviously, again, because our operational team was involved in the bidding and the mobilization, was ensuring the client understands the journey and not just the destination. A lot of clients just think the mobilization is going to solve everything from day one, and all the FM will be in place, everything will work 100%. Given the requirements by the client on the timing, and given that this was a first generation outsourcing, that was never going to be the case, and we needed to take the client along on that journey. So we very early on communicated and took them through the journey from taking it from first generation to third generation. So obviously when we got there, there was no planned maintenance. Everything was reactive, so we had to take over and start to focus on the planned maintenance and take the focus off the customer raising reactive requests. The maintenance was only done when it was working, again, which was a huge burden on the imams. So we had to really focus on communicating and giving activities for each of these areas. So we wanted to take it to the second, not only second but third generation. So going to that predictive maintenance, going to that increase in PPM, picking up issues before they occur. So we really focused on taking the client through this first to third generation. And what was important was actually showing them how the cause and effect of that relationship. So this is a graph here showing the total work orders that were raised by the imams or the client's engineers in the opening months. So from August through to February, you'll see obviously it's increased. I think we mobilized in August, September. And the next graph, you'll see that after the mobilization, once we started raising our service requests, and keep in mind this is reactive, not planned, which is sitting behind here as well, that increase. So the relationship between those two slides, you can see there's a direct relationship that as our work has increased, the focus has come off the client to raise those service requests or work orders, which is important for them to see. So a little bit about Ramadan. So obviously during the holy month of Ramadan, Muslims will fast from sunrise to sunset, and that's food and water. It's a time of reflection. It's a time, from our perspective, we like to detox as well. So there's no smoking during daylight hours. Lots of things that would happen traditionally in Dubai or Abu Dhabi with live music all stops as well. Additional prayer times occur, especially in the lead up to the last week of Ramadan, where you have some quite important, significant prayer times. Additional visitors will come to the mosques, so you'll really see especially at iftar time when prayer, when fasting is broken. A lot of people, the mosque will be the central area where people come, because another aspect of Ramadan is that of giving. So there's a lot of charity that happens. Many people will host dinners at the different iftars for people that are maybe not able to have grand dinners. They'll come along and have iftars, and everyone will sit together, it's a really great time. The mosques and community traditionally hold iftars, as I said, and that's not just for the mosques, it's in other areas as well, but traditionally so the mosques will be the central areas to do that. And also to understand that Ramadan, obviously, each year it moves closer towards January, and each year it comes back a week. But it doesn't have a fixed day, and actually starts with the moon sighting, which is done by the moon sighting committee. So you will know traditionally the night before if it's going to happen the next day. So again, something you need to be prepared for months in advance. And Ramadan then ends with Eid al-Fitr, which is a time of celebration, time of gift giving and bringing families together. And something to know about Ramadan is traditionally, while there are lots of events that the hotels and corporates will have, it's really a time of family and a time of giving. So for us, we had an added challenge. Obviously, with fasting during the day, it's difficult for our technicians. It's not difficult, it's challenging for them. With summer added as well, it's even more challenging. During the summer months in the Middle East, in the UAE, we have a midday working ban between 11 and 3 p.m. So if any workers or any technicians are seen working outdoors at that time, their company will face significant penalties. I've seen upwards of 250,000 dirhams, which is about 80,000 US dollars, fines given as well. So it's something very, very important, and now it's in Saudi Arabia as well. Something to understand is, obviously, with the mosques, all of our team were Muslims, so all of them were fasting during that time. So again, you need to adapt and change your service delivery model. The availability of shops to get equipment and consumables during that time decreases as well. So what traditionally will happen is the shops will be open maybe a little part of the day, and then most of them will come on and open at night. But again, it's something you really need to be prepared for in time. The labour law states that the working hours go down to 6 hours per day. So obviously there's no lunch break, so the Ministry of Labour drops the working hours back to 6 days. So again, changing your service delivery and your shift timings is vitally important, and all the logistics around it, such as vehicles. What also occurs is during Eid, there's Eid prayers that take place, and some of these areas are outdoors or in large areas, and some of those have been there or dormant for the whole year. So they only get used at Eid. So again, this was a big learning curve for us, was actually going in and getting access to those areas earlier, because sometimes they weren't in our portfolio. Sometimes we were called a week or 2 weeks before the end of Eid to be told, could you go and look at this location? So it's something we worked on with the client as well. So obviously, for us, as I said, a challenge is not a bad thing. A challenge is something that really can be used to advantage with an FM provider. So for us, we saw Ramadan and Eid as an opportunity and not so much a challenge. So we tried to plan as much in advance as we could, and that's something now that happens with our stakeholders, our client and their client also. So we plan well in advance. We also embrace the time a lot as well. So I fast each year with my team. So I have a number of iftar dinners with our technicians. This year, unfortunately, I was in Australia for my one in UAE, but I had one in Saudi Arabia, and it's a great time to sit down with your team and really have those one-on-one talks. And I must say that when you do try it, you also understand what your team is going through. So, when you try to set a meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, your brain is not at the same capacity it would be at 9 a.m. So you tend to hold the meetings in the morning, or you meet after hours. And we are much more productive after 7 p.m. after having iftar into the night, and even through to 2-3 a.m. we'll have meetings. There was a lot of cross-training that goes on. So now the contract has actually evolved to include, it's a total facilities management contract including cleaning as well. So what we did is we train a lot of our soft services team now to support MEP, and that's because the MEP team, they're mostly operating at night during Ramadan because the PPM drop down slowly, reactive increase, but the cleaners are obviously in the mosques doing split shifts or multiple shifts between them, so they'll see MEP issues before, again, the client. So we can not only train them in to identify what they need to identify, but also how to isolate. So if there's a water leak in an ablution area, training them and showing them where the isolation valve is so they can shut that down when they report that to the call center. Obviously, we changed our service delivery model to focus more on evenings, so a lot of the planned maintenance will occur in the evenings after evening prayer. Consumables and equipment, this was the most important aspect, so making sure that you've got at least 3 months volume and critical spares available, and this really needs to be done months in advance of Ramadan. You can't leave that to the last minute, because what you find is a lot of people are also doing the same thing. And visiting the Eid prayer locations 3 months prior to Ramadan starting as well. So again, not waiting for the client, even if it's not your portfolio. Something that we do now is we'll go around and we'll do condition assessments of those Eid prayer halls prior. So what have we learned or changed over the years? So the first thing is to never oversell the client on what you can achieve. So understanding, as we said, going from that first generation to third generation FM for us was vitally important, and there's still things that we continue to grow with. And basically, understanding what those different milestones will be so the client can see that cause and effect is vitally important. And especially when the condition of assets, a takeover is poor. And you'll see here, the photo on the left-hand side, someone's installed a electrical power outlet in a tree, so that's the first time I've seen that before. The general state of the civil, so that the painting there had all been peeled due to humidity and issues in the bathroom there. The facade of the building and plywood just falling apart. The amount of photos I could have selected here were amazing. Even the technicians that we were taking over from, we had photos of technicians digging water holes with no shoes on, up to their knees in water, looking for an electrical cable. So, huge challenges with these properties. So what have we learned or changed over the years? Again, the more prepared you are, the more you can embrace Ramadan. So again, now, as I said, we prepare 4 months in advance. We sit down with a client on numerous times and workshops prior, and also take into considerations the improvements. So obviously we didn't get a chance to do this in the first year, but in the second and third years we actually made a number of improvements to properties from an MEP perspective. So as I said, installing that additional electrical load, installing additional air conditioning, splitting the breakers on the distribution board so we could isolate more areas. We spent a lot of time in the second year doing that work, so that when we did get to Ramadan, we really could be part of that and embrace that, and we weren't running around so much, which was great. Obviously, you'll see here this is a sample of the predictive maintenance that was done. Again, this is something we trained our team in. It was really, really significant for us. The amount of faults that we found on DBs with incorrect connections on the breakers, and then that allowed us to replace that or fix that connection before a fault happened, which was vitally important. We've also grown and really developed a health and safety. So when we started, our focus was significantly on our health and safety for our team, and then what started to happen was we started to see issues with other contractors that would come. So doing things like civil works or project works or repainting. So you'll see here is actually a photo of a contractor that we found on one of the mosques that made their own scaffolding with a ladder on top. So when we highlighted this with the client then got us involved in not only looking at our health and safety, but the health and safety of the entire assets. We've now done NEBOSH training with all our FM team as well. We've done first aid training for all our technicians. And now we've got in place obviously a permit to work system which focuses on anyone that's coming on site obviously adhering to that permit to work system. And health and safety continues to be a huge challenge and an area that we've focused on. The communication with the imams, as I said, that was really vital, and it was an area that was really, I think, underestimated. And in the end, it ended up with us, really going and meeting every individual imam. And this is something that is to be thought of, not just from a mosque perspective, but even, as I said, when I looked after a large insurance provider in Australia, even in some of the remote areas, we really had a number of our team go out and do either a road show or sit down one-on-one and have a coffee or and meet each of the client's representatives. And that made it a lot better, because what people feel, especially when they're using a call center, is that they're making this call just to a machine. But if they understand that there's people behind that and that what we're there to do and the vision of the team and what we're setting out to do, it really does make a difference to them. Ensuring you're supporting the service functions to suppliers also coming along on the journey. This is again another area that we would have done even more so and increased, and we do now. So getting your human capital team, getting your finance team involved, and getting them to actually understand the contract, the service delivery. So one of the things that we'd like to do now more so is actually get those teams out of the office and actually seeing our team and meeting the client. Much the same also with our suppliers. So suppliers for us, we like to treat like partners, so we actually, again, like to bring them along that journey, because a client doesn't see them, they just see Khidmah, they see us, so we need to make sure they're part of that journey. So I would just want to say thank you very much for sticking on, and hopefully it doesn't go for too long. I'm open for any questions if anyone's got them or wants to type them in, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been very informative discussion, and you demonstrated a good challenge in this kind of pretty much crowded facilities as mosques, as I believe. We do have here a question. How did you get around sensitivities, selection of staff who are non-Muslims that they may have to be factored in for facility management service delivery, or was this not an issue?
It's an interesting, because when we first were mobilizing, I worked very closely with the client, and I had concerns of myself, not being Muslim, going to the mosques. But I can tell you now, when I went to meet the imams, because I met a number of them myself, very, very welcoming. It's something I find interesting. I've never had religion forced on me by anyone here, but really embracing and bringing me in and teaching me, and me being open to that has been a real eye-opener. Obviously, there are some challenges with the mosques as far as things like my team can't go into the prayer halls with shoes on, which is important. There are religious documents, obviously the Holy Quran that is on the wall, or there might be artifacts that are on the wall that cannot be touched. So we had to do a lot of training and education around that. But I can say that there was never an issue with religious backgrounds for the mobilization. What we did though is we took a view that we wanted our staff to actually be part of the mosques as well. So we mobilized, we moved a lot of our Muslim staff or Muslim technicians to the contract. And what we actually did is we do now a yearly Umrah event with them as well. So if our technicians perform well or have been with us for some time, we actually send a number of those to Mecca to perform Umrah. So we wanted the service to be beyond just a contract. We wanted them to feel part of the mosques, so we did move a lot of our staff there.
Yeah, I believe that this kind of teamwork is usually in the Arab Gulf area. It's there. I'm here also in Saudi Arabia, practicing some kind of multicultural workmanship, and they are just cooperating, even they are not the same language, the same religion, and everything.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've been to obviously Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi is an amazing mosque, and the presidential affairs there it is a tourist attraction as well as a working mosque, and people are encouraged to come and to understand what goes on there. And I've taken a lot of people that come to visit me, and they find it fascinating, as do I. I'm open to learning lots. That's why I'm in an FM, and I've never been made to feel like I shouldn't be in an area, or that people are not welcoming of me to be there. Always very welcome.
Yeah, wonderful. I don't have here other questions, but I do have my own question, if you allow me. Was there any kind of as-built drawing or documentation for Khidmah when they started in maintaining these mosques, or you feel that this was a gap for the previous history of these facilities?
Yeah, it's a huge gap. What it's like in the region is traditionally to try and get the full list of documentation and correct handover from any project, even if it's under construction at the moment, is difficult. But on a project where even the location of the mosques was incorrect, it was very difficult to get. Those mosques that were under construction, yes, we did get access to as-built, but for others we had to actually do a lot of the drawings ourselves and try and locate those as well. And now what we actually do is and this is the same for many of our clients, we actually offer to get involved a lot earlier. We actually have given feedback during design stages of construction, because as you know, obviously sustainability is a big focus here with access to water. And for me, the mosques is one of the great areas where ablution areas now. We've done a pilot where we've installed a grey water installation, and we use that then to irrigate the external area and even the imams' gardens. A lot of the imams will grow the local vegetables for a lot of the worshippers that will come and give them vegetables. So we do that as well, which is great.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate your presentation. I believe that this is a very good experience to people who are not familiar here with the region. I'll just remind our colleagues and all attendees or people who are following us that we do have what we call it like a scholarship award. You can follow this through the link here, and we also would like to notify you with the upcoming events and other sessions that, of course, are the effort of our IFMA STAG committee. We'd like you to contribute and have any social media contribution like Twitter and other LinkedIn and so on. These are the links that you can contribute and put your thoughts. And again, I'm reminding you with registering for the next session. So we have the session number 6, which is facility management in the Middle East, opportunities and the challenges. And I believe it's a little bit close to what Ryan was handling now. This will be presented by Muhammad Lagoudi, myself. And then session number 7, facility management in the Central and East Europe, opportunities and the challenges as well, will be done by Andre Sturb. And then the session number 8, it will be like a panel discussion, or let's say it will be moderated by Marcos and Andre again. The contribution from your side to IFMA Council is appreciated. You can just go for this and volunteer in one of these councils. We thank you again for joining this event. I thank Ryan again for his informative presentation, and please take a moment to answer the survey at the webinar, and I believe that you can just handle the recording anytime. You can refer to and get back for these moments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a wonderful meeting, virtual meeting. I believe that we can organize something when I'm coming to Dubai or you come here in Riyadh. It will be my pleasure to receive you.
No, that'd be great. I was in Riyadh a few weeks ago, so let me know if you're in UAE, or I'll let you know when I'm in Riyadh. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna save your contacts and we can communicate each other later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.